So now that the early 2023 MacBook Pro has dropped in price, post the launch of the new M3 Max, I thought I'd review it on this channel and delve into whether it's still worth buying, and spoiler alert, it very much is. I know most of those who bought these models at launch are probably a little gutted that these have been replaced within a year of release, but for those in the market planning to buy a new machine, these getting replaced so soon is fantastic news, because you're really not missing out on much by going with the older and cheaper machine. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this, it would be appreciated. So the one I have is the absolute base double binned M2 Pro, which I think is going to be the model many buy because these can now be found for the same price as a base 14-inch M3, but what I say applies to all configurations of this MacBook generation, including the 16-inch. So let's begin with the design of this machine, and well, it looks very similar to the current models because why fix something if it ain't broke? I think that's a saying, but anyways, what I'm trying to convey is that this still feels like peak MacBook design 2 years later. I really can't fault anything here, and yes, I know some are gonna complain about the humongous notch, but it's a non-issue in my opinion. I usually forget it's there, and so I truly believe this design is perfect. And the one visual difference this has compared to the newer M3 is that, of course, there is an extra port on the right side. More ports are always appreciated, and this allows you to charge the MacBook from either side of the machine, which is pretty handy. You also get Thunderbolt 4 ports instead of Thunderbolt 3 on the M3, but personally guys, I don't think the extra speeds here make a big difference. I care more about the additional ports, plus you have the same HDMI 2.1 ports, the SD card reader, and also the high impedance headphone jack like the current models. Another advantage with this older machine compared to the M3 is that it does support multiple displays. Much like the M3 Pro, M2 Pro also supports up to 2 external displays with up to 6K resolution at 60Hz over Thunderbolt, compared to just one external display with the M3. Now I'll be honest guys, this is a very niche use case in my opinion, but if you are someone who has 2 displays in your setup, then of course M2 Pro is the way to go. Moving on to performance, the base M2 Pro has 10 CPU cores with a split of 6 performance and 4 efficiency cores, as well as 16 GPU cores. And well, there's not a lot for me to say here because, surprise surprise, Apple Silicon is still awesome. I have been using the M1 MacBook Air for the last 3 years, and I've yet to have any performance issues, and so M2 Pro flies through anything I throw at it. Obviously, I've been mainly editing videos, it's regular 4K footage, I don't do many fancy edits, but regardless, there's been absolutely no slowdowns. I also don't hear the fans inside very often, so yes, performance is great all round. I also don't play games very often with my Mac, so I don't care about the lack of hardware ray tracing here with the M2 that of course the new M3 SoC offers. What's more important for me is having the headroom in terms of RAM, and so a big reason why I would prefer buying the M2 Pro MacBook over the M3 is because this machine has 16 gigs of RAM as standards. Now 8 gigs might be fine for most, and even when testing the M3 MacBook Pro, I did not pick up on many issues. It was completely fine for my use, but I don't think that's always going to be the case. You see, as the machine gets older and it becomes more taxing for this machine to run new versions of applications, I am very sure 8 gigs of RAM is going to become a bit of an issue. So yes, while I think it's fine for most right now, having a machine with 16 gigs of RAM is going to benefit you in the long run, and well, the M2 Pro has this as standard for the same price as the M3. Now yes, I know this has a slower SSD inside since Apple cheaped out a little and gave us one single NAND chip instead of 2 NAND chips, and Apple has now fixed this with the 14-inch M3, but I don't think this will make a big difference. One could argue that swap memory would be worse on this machine with the inferior SSD inside, but I've had zero problems when testing this, plus the memory bandwidth here is actually higher than what M3 and M3 Pro offers, so ultimately I would not be put off by the SSD issue. The display on this is easily one of, if not the best display on a laptop right now. It's basically the same panel you get on the current models, so it's a 120Hz mini LED panel that has True Tone and P3 support, and it just looks incredible. Now I am aware the new models offer 600 nits of brightness when watching SDR content, compared to 500 nits on this, but do remember there are apps that can unlock the 4000 nits of brightness these displays can produce, So ultimately, don't be put off by the M2 Pro because of that. If you watch a lot of movies and TV shows, this display is perfect. Now with the webcam, I'll be honest, I feel like many gas up the quality of the sensor on these new Macs, but I actually can't tell much of a difference between the 1080p FaceTime camera on this and the 720p FaceTime camera on my M1 MacBook Air. At the end of the day, it's a small sensor behind a screen, and so I would suggest using an iPhone via continuity camera instead, or just plug an actual camera into the machine instead. It's a very easy process and both produce much better footage than this webcam ever will, but I guess it comes in handy for the occasional Zoom call. The speakers on this still blow my mind because they have so much bass and volume for MacBook speakers, and I just can't comprehend that such a small machine has speakers that are this good. Apple's clearly the market leader in this aspect, and the mics are also crystal clear for calls. And here's a webcam and mic test for you guys on this MacBook. Let me know how this sounds. The keyboard is also fantastic, very nice to use, and the trackpad is perfection. It's nice and large, and every time I use a Mac, I come to appreciate how incredible Apple's trackpads are, because when I was using Windows laptops back in the day, that was the one thing that sucks consistently in all of them, and it seems Apple's really the only manufacturer that can nail this part of the laptop experience. Touch ID has also been reliable and it's rapid. Connectivity wise, you get Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3, which does match what the M3 models offer, and I've had no issues in this aspect. It's been rock solid. The endurance has also been great. I've noticed the Mac only drops around 16% of battery life once I finish editing for 2 hours. And what's crazy is that this is one of the worst performing Macs when it comes to battery life, but it's still plenty good for most consumers, and it blows my mind how efficient Apple Silicon is. Though of course, do note if you're buying from a third-party refurb seller, or of course you're going for a used machine, definitely inquire about the battery health and the cycles the battery has gone through, because overall battery life you get is going to depend on that. However, considering the M2 Pro only launched in Jan, I doubt you're going to find Macs with really bad battery health within a year of release. So overall guys, it's a no-brainer for me to recommend this. Ultimately, the M3 models are very similar and only offer marginal performance upgrades, so definitely save your money and go with the M2 Pro instead. And I wouldn't say this advice only applies to those looking for the base M3 MacBook, because even the M3 Pro is a very minor upgrade over the M2 Pro. I think performance is like 6% better, which is really nothing. So unless you want the Max, which does offer substantial upgrades, definitely find one of these early 2023 MacBook Pros for less instead, because it's going to be a very similar experience. And before someone shouts at me in the comments, yes, I'm comparing a new MacBook to a used or refurbished M2 Pro, and some might be anxious about going that route, but here's the thing guys, if you buy from Apple Refurb, which I do very often, the experience is going to be perfectly fine. I have now purchased 3 Macs from Apple's Refurb site, and all of them have basically been pristine. I will admit this M2 Pro model has a small blemish near one of its feet, but I've had brand new devices with some sort of blemish out of the box, so this is a non-issue for me. Also, of course, much like Apple's new products, you can easily return it if you have issues, but I think for the savings to be had with refurb devices, it is undoubtedly worth considering, and I can't recommend it enough. Also look around at what third-party retailers are offering, because they could be doing clearance sales to get rid of existing stock, and you might be able to get a brand new sealed device for even less, which would be a fantastic deal. Finally, if you want to play it risky, you can of course delve into the used market, and that might give you even better deals, though do make sure you hear from the seller about the battery health beforehand, and make sure the overall cosmetic condition of the machine is still good. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.